So, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Welcome back to Talking City. And today we've got a jam-packed episode for you. First up, Erling Haaland's reportedly signed a 9.5-year contract deal. Signing to Manchester City until he's 34. That's one big commitment. That Jesus, and I thought a bag for life or something. So he's now going to be reportedly the highest paid player in the Premier League. We're going to break down City's 2-2 draw with Brentford. Seppi struggles. Haaland, apparently he is actually human. Whether City fans should be concerned. So first of all, my name is not Simon. I'm Luke Walters. I'm back twice in 1 week. How lucky are you? Yeah, I'm replacing Simon, and today I am with Joe Bray. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Luke. How are you?
Yeah, very, very good. Very, very good. How are you?
Busy morning because that reported contract is confirmed, and Haaland is a City player until he's into his 30s, and no Real Madrid move on the cards, and it's sort of come out of nowhere, but it's an absolutely massive deal. And last night we heard that they've agreed a deal for Omar Marmoush. They've got 2 defenders on the way. They're not hanging around in January, and I would suggest that the Haaland deal is as big as any new signing.
Oh, well, I think on the last podcast, I compared the Kyle Walker drama and the Man City drama to an episode of to the Gavin and Stacey Christmas special. But after that, then you had the 8-0 win, you had the 2-2 draw, you've had the new signings being announced. Haaland, it's more like the Chris Tennant Nolan film, and there's so many twists and turns. I'm just like, what's going on? And I was like, it's just relentless. I was like, it's constantly something mad is just popping up every day. It just doesn't seem to stop, really.
The documentary for this season is going to be absolutely ridiculous because it's just one thing after another, and struggles and signings and contracts, and in the space of a month they've signed, or 2 months, they've got Pep on another 2-year contract, which was massive. Haaland on a 10-year contract. They've got 2 new defenders to sort of sort out the defense for however many years. A prolific striker from Egypt playing in Germany that we hadn't really heard of on our radar, but he's going to go and add competition in attack. And in the space of a couple of days, you're looking at, you might sign a 20 goal a season striker and commit your record goal scorer in a Premier League season to another 10 years. And it's a massive statement of intent.
Yeah, so yeah, Haaland's deal is reported to be $500,000 a week. That's mad. That's absolutely monumental. And what do you think the City? We know what City are like as a club, but their intent going forward now, because that's just ridiculous amounts of money.
Yeah, I genuinely don't know what I would do with that amount of money. I wouldn't turn it down, just as Haaland clearly hasn't. But it's money that you can't even think of, really. And I think that obviously is a factor in why he's signed, because he's got a child on the way. He knows he can become a legend here at City, and also sort himself out for life. And he is a player who is a worldwide superstar and will get the money that comes with that. But I think there is also genuinely a factor that he was probably surprised at how much he's enjoyed it at City. His camp have always played up those Real Madrid links, and he'll come to City, but he wants to test himself in other leagues as well. And they never played down those links and sort of actively encouraged them. Was very in his initial contract, and talk of letting him leave for probably less money than he was worth, because it was all part of the Haaland package. Was he wants to go on at some point, and he probably won't end his career at City. And City are probably a club who want to sign these players for the rest of their careers. So it's a bit of a U-turn in that, but I think it's over a long period of time where we have been hearing that Haaland is very happy here. He loves working with Pep Guardiola. He likes playing with players like Foden and De Bruyne and all these players. He must be able to see the players coming through and the transfer plans City have, and be confident enough to say, yeah, I'll stay here. And it was telling. It was not a surprise because he is a confident man, but it was telling that in his sort of interview on his new contract, he's saying it's going to be hard, but I can break that Premier League record. And the only thing stopping him from breaking that Alan Shearer record was, will he leave in time? If you give Haaland 10 seasons and he stays fit and he continues on the way he's going, he's going to get 260 goals easily. So now it's a case of when he's going to do it, not if he's going to do it. And Sergio Aguero got 260 goals in all competitions for City. He's got an opportunity to smash those all-time records, not just the season records and the fastest player to X amount of goals. He's got an opportunity to set records that will never be broken. And I think it's an interesting turn that he wants to do that instead of test himself in other leagues. That's how he sees his legacy. The legacy previously was he wants to do it in Germany, in England, in Spain, and wherever. Now he wants to be the man who never is beaten in a particular field, and that field is scoring lots and lots of goals.
Well, let's just hope he stays humble, as he so rightly put to Arteta.
Nice.
Yeah, let's hope he stays humble. But yeah, personally, I thought he was at the door a lot sooner, because he's pretty much done everything in English football. What's he got left? He's got the quadruple, maybe, potentially. But it's like, Jesus, that's massive. And obviously, his contract is an incredible figure. But do you think this raises the bar for Premier League wages, and could it cause a ripple effect? Because we kind of heard Mo Salah is kind of wanting a similar-ish level deal from Liverpool, and now obviously Haaland has got. Do you think this changes the game for the Premier League salary bands?
It's always rising. The more TV deals that are done, the more games that are played, the more competition, and everything ties into it. And yeah, I'm complaining about the amount of games and the scheduling and all of this, but the upshot is they get a lot of money, and we're hearing about how much money they're going to get from the Club World Cup. And the more money that comes into the bank, the more they can spend on players. They're going to be spending over 100 million on players this January. I mean, they made a significant profit. I can't remember to hand, but it was in the tens of millions in the summer. I think back-to-back overall profits in their annual reports of 70 odd million. They have the money. They're opening the new stand, and that's going to be more revenue. It's there to spend, if you like, but yeah, if you're looking from a neutral perspective, you're thinking that is a hell of a lot of money, and is it going to widen the gap between these big clubs and the smaller clubs? Now, this season, City have struggled, and even with Haaland, they've not walked away with the league, and they're not going to defend the title. Every club is not immune to that sort of thing, but it does feel like every year the three clubs who come up are the three clubs who go down, or at least doing relegation and things like this. I don't think they specifically will do anything monumental in terms of the overall landscape of Premier League finances, but it's just symptomatic of the way it's going. And City will say, we've earned a lot of money in the transfer market, we've got it to spend. They'll argue that Haaland will bring in a lot of money commercially and sponsorship wise, and if he fires them to win the Club World Cup, the prize money that is associated with that, likewise in the Champions League, there's stupid amounts of money available for that. So it's weighing up all those costs, and it's a conversation that needs to be had. But I think, yeah, it's a difficult one when it comes to City and Haaland, because it's always a stick to beat City with, when actually United are doing it. You can look at the money that United are spending on failed transfers and wages and everything like that, and Liverpool and Arsenal, and I mean the money Chelsea have spent billion pounds on transfers. It's not just City. Let's put it that way.
So him signing like such a long deal at the stages of his career shows like such a immense trust in City's vision going forward. What do you think this means? Because how has he been brought into that? Because we have heard that he does want to go test himself. The Real Madrid, the Barcelonas, the other leagues. I know he's still in the Bundesliga, but why do you think there's been that sudden change? I know. Yeah, it just seemed a bit out of the blue compared to previous years, when everyone's expecting us like, oh, if we get 3 years out of him, we'll be happy. And now all of a sudden it's like, cool, 10. It just seems a bit so perplexing. All of a sudden it's like, do you think he's given up on that Real Madrid dream? Like what's changed so rapidly?
I think the romantic answer is he's fallen in love with City, and he's in the perfect place for him to play football and sort out his family for life. As we can see with these reported figures, he's got a team that is built to supply him. He's scoring. Looked at his record. He's got 111 goals and 15 assists in 126 games. So that's a goal or an assist every single game. And when you take away substitutions, that's less than a game. That's ridiculous. He is the main man. He's the star. He can get whatever sponsorship deal he wants. He's got records that he can just collect every other week. And if you're a striker, there's probably nowhere better to play football than City. He may also look, if Real Madrid was the dream, they've got Vinicius, they've just signed Mbappe. There probably isn't an opening at the Bernabeu for a couple of years, especially if they're going to spend some money on Alexander-Arnold in terms of wages, and they're always looking for these next players. And he probably thinks staying at City is maybe the better long-term option given that. But yeah, I think if you want to put your blue tinted glasses on, it's a romantic thing that he's fallen in love. There's obviously the family connection, but it's probably the cleverest and wisest career move for him as well, because he can become an undisputed club legend here and establish himself as the best in the world in his position. And yeah, Real Madrid has that attraction, and it's the biggest club in the world, and you are even more of a superstar over there. But if you can't have that, I'd say City is the next best thing, and that's not to put City down. But at the moment, I think Haaland has everything he needs, and this gives him even more. And if he's the main man of the rebuild, he can prove even more doubters wrong. That's what he likes doing as well. If he can take City from Guardiola to whatever is next, he's going to be the face and the main man in that transition to the post Guardiola era, which is going to be difficult. If he can help City through that and continue scoring goals and make it as seamless as possible, that is another thing that you can write in his legacy. And I also think that Premier League record is something that he really, really wants.
But potentially, though, could that kind of almost alienate the next manager coming in? Because obviously this is Pep's Man City. If you've got someone coming in afterwards to replace him, and Haaland's there for the next 6 or 7 years, and this manager's not performing, he's always going to be looking over the shoulder, because Haaland's going to outlast pretty much anyone that comes in, essentially. So is it going to be hard for them to shift that focus from, oh, we're no longer Pep's team, but Haaland is always going to be there? So it kind of gives maybe a jaded view on it, potentially, because you always see it when players outlast the manager. And we see it at United now, what's happening with like Rashford and stuff. And they seem to be the one. It potentially, could that happen to the next manager coming in with Haaland? I don't see it personally, but it's something that's always there.
That's how you look at it, isn't it? Because there's a lot of praise for Guardiola in Haaland's interview, and he clearly loves playing with Guardiola and is keen to play with him for another 2 years or even more if Pep does decide to stay. I don't think he will, but he's got that contract until 2027 as the manager. But you wouldn't look at Haaland and say he's a Pep Guardiola player. Not even Sergio Aguero was really a Pep Guardiola player. He scores a lot of goals because Guardiola has adapted his system to Haaland, really. So a new manager can say, well, if Haaland can adapt to that and vice versa, and Guardiola can adapt to Haaland, then whatever happens next, Haaland will score goals. If you put a cross into the box, Haaland's going to score it. If you put a through ball to him, more often than not, he's going to slide it under the goalkeeper or chip it over him or find a new way to acrobatically score a cross that he shouldn't score. And I think a player like that will adapt to a system rather than sort of be prohibitive. A new manager is always going to have that shadow of Guardiola behind him, but I would say a striker like Haaland is more of a help than a hindrance.
So talking about Haaland scoring goals, Brentford 2-2. Yeah, he didn't have the same impact as we're used to seeing from him. He looked more human than we thought. Brentford seemed to cut off his supply quite effectively. But do you think teams are starting to figure him out, or is this just an off day?
I wouldn't say either, because I think the chances he got, he connected with them. The keeper made some all right saves. They were not difficult, but not simple. And it's the same thing with Haaland. You're more concerned when he's not getting chances than when he is getting chances. And City got 2 goals that should have been enough to win that game. Haaland was keeping the defence busy, and that allowed space for Foden, for example. And I thought his link-up play was good. I think there's been far more games recently where he's either not been involved or has missed chances that are more concerning than this one. I can see why there is maybe a bit of concern of, he didn't score those chances and they were straight at the keeper and however many shots on target. But I wouldn't say any alarm bells were particularly ringing with those when, I mean, Haaland scores a lot of goals, but he also misses a lot of chances because he gets himself in the position to have those chances, and that's part of Haaland's game. And yeah, like I say, he's more frustrated when he's not getting the service. But I think what City have done quite well to get out of this run is just look for Haaland again. And he said himself that he's not been good enough and he needs to be better, and he knows that he's taken that personally. But yeah, I do think the Brentford game, the problems were not, they didn't throw away that game because of Haaland. And yeah, if Haaland had scored 1 or 2 of those goals, those last 2 goals from Brentford wouldn't have mattered. But I just don't, I think if you're looking for what went wrong, Haaland is so far down that list that you've got more important things to worry about.
So yeah, the Brentford game was obviously a very, very frustrating result, and felt like more like 2 points were dropped than 1 point gained at this point. The defense looked shaky at times, especially on set piece. Do you think this is becoming a consistent issue, or is it just one of those games?
It would be one of those games if they hadn't done exactly the same thing for about 10 of the last 15 games or whatever the run is now. You've got 3 wins in a row and you're thinking, we can look up here. Pep still isn't happy with how they're playing, but they're getting the results. And it was only a League Two team, but they put 8 past Salford, and you're thinking, okay, they've got a bit of rhythm back. And Brentford is always a difficult place to go. City have lost there in the past. They've won there, but been given very, very difficult games. And to go 2-0 up was as impressive as anything else they've done in the last 2 or 3 months. And then they've again fall apart, and it's the mentality, and one defender makes a mistake, so another does. And to leave Wissa unmarked in the area 6 yards out to control it badly and then score is you're not going to get away with that. And I think Brentford overall probably would say they deserved a point, and maybe they did. But for City to throw away 2 goals, it's as frustrating as the United game and the Feyenoord game. And those instances suggest it's definitely a mentality thing, but it's a pattern, because as soon as one thing happens, there's a fear that something else will happen. And that second goal felt inevitable because the first one went in. If they'd not conceded that first one, then you think, okay, they'll ride it out, and they've got a very, very good win. But as soon as that first one goes in, it was like they were waiting for the second one. And you're looking back, and Ortega gets a hand to it. Could Akanji have done a bit more? Who could have stopped the cross? And yeah, it just felt frustrating from everybody, but also inevitable. And they've taken these steps forward, little steps. Guardiola still wants more, but they are forward, and then this is a backward step. And it's a reminder that they're not out of it yet. And everything Guardiola said after West Ham, when he tore into the players that they're not back, was proven right. And he will have said that to want his players to prove him wrong, and they didn't. So yeah, they've got to go to Ipswich now and get a positive result, because then they're going to PSG in the Champions League, where there's qualification riding on that and a lot of money. And if they don't get through in the Champions League, that becomes a whole other crisis altogether. They can take probably slumping in the Premier League because they can put it down to injuries, and they know they will get out of it, and they are in the process of getting out of it. But if they don't qualify in the Champions League, there's so much attention. I mean, I was listening to the Manchester United game on the way back from the Youth Cup last night, and the commentary on 5 Live was basically saying if they lose this game, because they were 1-0 down to Southampton before they came back, the amount of heat that they will get, everybody will pile on them, because this is such a bad result. And I don't think City have had that specific result yet. They had a couple of bad ones in December, but I think if it got to the Champions League and they were knocked out for whatever reason, I think that would be the time where they feel the heat and they feel the pressure from outside. They're on the way of getting out, but things like Brentford remind you that they're not out of it yet by any stretch.
And obviously, credit to Brentford as well. They played with like incredible energy and discipline. What do you think Thomas Frank's side got right in that game, and that other teams might try to emulate when facing City going forwards?
Do you know what? Brentford are always good against City. I think they've won at the Etihad, and they won in, I think it was the last game before the FA Cup final and Champions League final in the treble season. And City made a lot of changes, but it's never ever an easy game, and Guardiola knows that and doesn't take them lightly. So he won't be surprised that they came back. He won't be surprised that they played like they did. Their home record is ridiculous. I think they've only lost one maybe in the league, and I know they lost in the FA Cup, but that's the FA Cup. They are always just well organised. They have a plan. They stick to it. All the players know what they're doing. They might not be big names, but they're all chosen specifically to fit the system. And it annoys me a little bit when Guardiola's asked every single time they play Brentford, when is Thomas Frank going to get a big job? Because that job is perfect for him. I think if you put him at United or Chelsea or whatever you class as a bigger club, he's not going to do what he's done, because he has, a bit like Haaland at City, he has everything he needs to do well. And I've not looked at the table, but I would guess Brentford are doing probably better than a lot of these clubs that might want to take him. And I think he also works well because there's maybe less pressure. If you put him in at Spurs, for example, say Spurs go and sack Postecoglou, you would say, right, Thomas Frank's probably a good option to take over. We've seen so many times these managers who do well at unfancied clubs, Graham Potter, for example, then they don't always do well under pressure because there's so much going on. So, yeah, I think Brentford are just perfectly set up to operate as they are doing, a bit like Brighton, and they're just quite happy doing what they're doing and upsetting the odds. And I remember those clubs being in League One 10, 15 years ago, and now they're established Premier League sides taking points off far, far richer clubs, and they fully deserve what they're doing.
Yeah, I can't wait for Wrexham to come up to the Premier League and do the same.
I can wait for that. I can wait for that one.
That's a good documentary. Yeah, that's bad. Yeah, so looking at City's midfield now a little bit closer, a player that I haven't talked about on the podcast because I've only done one. This is my second. So Kevin De Bruyne. Yeah, some good moments, but the midfield seemed to struggle overall, struggle for control. Do you think City need to tweak the midfield setup for games like this, or do you need to look at the midfield going forward?
I mean, they're still looking for that solution without Rodri. You don't want to keep saying Rodri, but that they've not found that, and they've got Kovacic doing what he can do, and Bernardo, I think, has been doing a good job personally, but I know a lot of fans don't think so. And if everyone's there and fit and at their best, players like Kevin De Bruyne are playing better. So is Phil Foden, and De Bruyne's been up and down. But I think when you see him whipping those balls, you're thinking, okay, you've got something back, because that is peak typical Kevin De Bruyne, and the movement from Foden and that deft touch. That's what we've been missing recently for City. And if those players are just slowly, steadily getting those little bits of link-up play, and the rest of it might not be perfect. Brentford, again, are the latest team to sort of just race through City's midfield and carve them open, and that's a concern. But I think when you look at De Bruyne, you've got to look at what he does in attacking sense, and Guardiola made it clear the other day or the week that he's not good enough in defence. He doesn't have that mindset, so he is still an attacking player. So when you play De Bruyne, it's got to be looking forward, and you've got to have a system that protects him at the back and do that work for him. So it's a difficult one. He himself says that he's still not fully fit, and he's still feeling the effects of all those injuries and the time that he's had out. And he comes back and he plays 4 or 5 games in a row, then he's out, then he's forced to play all these games in a row. And I think they would like to manage him differently if they could. So it's a tricky one. But to see him put that ball in just made me think that it outweighs the negatives really, because when he's doing that, something in him is back, and we've not seen it. So to see it is undoubtedly a positive sign.
So looking ahead to the January transfer window, we talked about midfield struggling. Where do you think City needs strength the most? Do you think it is the midfield, or do you think it's the defence? Obviously, because Kyle Walker leaving. It's a bit of a mystifying question.
Well, we're what, sort of 55-60% of the way through the window, and City have been very active and decisive, and 3 players are going to come in, maybe more. They're looking at another defender, but no midfielder. And all of us are saying they need a midfielder, and every single game you're thinking the midfielders is being overrun. They need that, but they're signing 2 young centre backs and a sort of a striker, number 10 player, and no midfielder. So it's a risk. But again, if that player doesn't exist, they said pretty early in the window, no Zubimendi, no Guimaraes. So after those 2 players, who do you go for in that position? Are you waiting until the summer when someone's available? It's clearly a decision, because if there was a player they wanted to sign, they've shown with the Marmoush and Kusanov and Rice deals that they will go out and get them and pay the money for them. So to almost avoid a defensive midfielder feels quite telling and a very, very interesting choice. But I will always go back to the fact that and City always do this, if there isn't a player there or the deal isn't right, they don't make it. So if that deal doesn't exist, you probably are best looking at future-proofing your defence and signing the lad who's got 20 goals and 14 assists in the Bundesliga, because you're struggling to score goals. If the answer to the Rodri question and finding a solution and not believing that solution is available in January, if the answer to that is go and sign someone who's just going to score your way out of trouble and support Haaland, and also try and get some defenders and add some more bodies, but defenders who will also be there for the next 10 years or so, if that's the answer, then it could be quite a fun second half of the season and a sort of we'll score more goals than you approach. I'm not sure. Obviously, a midfielder is what they need, but they don't need a midfielder who isn't going to be a good fit for the long term. So it's a risk, but it could be a calculated one to not go for that.
But do you think you can see any potentially the young talent stepping up, like a James McAtee? Do you think he's in the position to kind of start getting some first team minutes?
Yeah, when he's played, he's looked better, and you can't knock a hat trick in any form, even if it's in the FA Cup. And he's answered what everybody has been saying, but also what Guardiola's wanted, is that when you come on, you've got to do something. He isn't the answer in defensive midfield, and even if you play him, maybe you move Bernardo back or someone else, but he won't solve that himself. What I think McAtee will do is help players like De Bruyne and Foden, in the sense that if they're tiring after 60 minutes and you're relatively comfortable, Guardiola can now be more confident that McAtee can come on and keep hold of that. And it's tricky. Things like Brentford happen, and you're turning around and doubting things like that. But I don't know, in terms of a defensive midfielder from the academy, they don't really exist. They've got some very good defensive midfielders, but not necessarily first team ready. Nico O'Reilly seems to be playing a new position every week. He looked like he was going to be an option there, but Guardiola hasn't used him, so clearly doesn't want to throw him in such a difficult environment. He seems to be happy with what he's got, and it's tricky, and it's like you're screaming at your screen if you're watching it on TV, or you're screaming from the stands and saying sign a defensive midfielder or put someone else there because it's not working. But I think his hands are tied a little bit, and he wants to trust the players who've been there. The more players who come back, it will be better. I mean, Ruben Dias is back in training. If you get all those defenders back, you can maybe push John Stones forward. You can push Akanji forward. Rico Lewis has played a lot of football. He's had a rest for a bit. If you can get him back into his better form, you can play him there, and suddenly you've got a bit more support in that area and just more numbers to stop those waves of attacks coming through. That might be the way, but it's a question we've been asking all season, and there's still no obvious answer. But it feels like the business that City are doing suggests that they don't think there's an external answer. So it might be they've just got to put sticking plasters on that midfield until the end of the season, where they can take stock, welcome Rodri back, and find a plan B from there.
Yeah, I was going to apply about more transfers, but I think the Haaland contract deal is going to kind of dominate the headlines and everyone's chat for the longest while. And I think all rumours of transfers will be quite quiet over the next few days anyway. So I'm not going to press on that.
Well, we do have Marmoush coming. There's a deal agreed for Marmoush. That was on Thursday night, and Kusanov and Rice are on the way, and deals are agreed for those. That's 3 signings coming in, and I think the Marmoush one's going to be very interesting because he is banging form. He scored and got 2 assists as City were throwing a lead away against Brentford, and it's interesting the timing of the Haaland deal being announced. You just announce that when you've got it, but you're going to sign a support player, but also competition for him. It'll be a bit like the Alvarez situation. It's sort of like a statement to Marmoush to say, you're coming in, you scored a lot of goals, help us out, but also this fella's still number one and will always be number one. And I was speaking to a journalist in Germany who's watched Marmoush quite a lot and said he's good on his own up front, but he's also good with a physical, pacey striker. So it could be like when we saw Alvarez and Haaland play together, that they're actually better as a pairing, or Marmoush playing a little bit deeper and linking and playing in those pockets that Guardiola likes, and that has a knock-on effect of where De Bruyne plays and where Foden plays. And you've obviously got Grealish and Sabinho and Doku, who might be moved around as a result of that. So finding where Marmoush plays is going to be interesting. It will also help if you have an opportunity, like we were saying before, with resting De Bruyne and Foden, etc. on 60 minutes, you can take Haaland off sooner. No player has played more minutes this season than Haaland. And I think the Salford game was only the second game he's not featured in. So giving those opportunities to Haaland will be important. But Marmoush is going to come in. His record of goals and assists is almost twice as good as Haaland's this season. I think he's averaging a contribution every 57 minutes, Marmoush, and Haaland's about 112. So it's about an hour compared to 2 hours. And Marmoush will look at that and say, I'm in form, play me. And it's up to Guardiola to find a way to get him in quickly, but also the other players to respond and say, this new lad might be good, but he's got to prove himself. And we know what we're doing as well. So it's going to be a very interesting dynamic when he comes in. But the more you look at it, the more you think it's a good opportunity that they couldn't really turn down. And even if we don't know the transfer fee yet, but even if it's close to what Frankfurt wanted, which was about 67 million, that's what you've just sold Alvarez for. And he is basically an Alvarez replacement who scores a lot of goals. So doesn't feel like a terrible deal.
So with City now currently lying at 5th in the Premier League, only 12 points behind. Apologies. Only 12 points behind Liverpool. Liverpool seem to be dropping points left, right, and centre. Drawing against Nottingham Forest. Nothing against Forest. Half expect them to do a lesser and win the league this season somehow. But yeah, they're 12 points just out the top 4. You've got the influx of signings now. Got Marmoush coming in. Do you expect City now to try and press on and be like, right, okay, cool, we've got the players coming in now. Let's try and push for that Premier League title, or do you think they're just like, let's just get Champions League. Let's just settle for top 4 and just try and manage that. So they're not over-egging it this season and just trying to play it safe just to keep Champions League for next season.
Yeah, I've probably been someone who's been not clinging on, but arguing that they still can win the title longer than most people have, but it would be the comeback of all comebacks, and they need, they're 6th, so they need 5 teams to drop a lot of points. And Liverpool, they're dropping a few points, but Nottingham Forest have been brilliant. And a home game against United is always difficult for Liverpool, and it isn't just on that game. Isn't just played on form; it's played on rivalry and a lot of emotion. And they'd probably take a point overall in that kind of game, and they can afford to do it because they're 4 points clear with the game in hand. And that game in hand is against Everton, who have got a new manager, but who also don't often beat Liverpool. So, yeah, I think it's still Liverpool's title to lose by a long stretch. You would expect teams like Forest and maybe Newcastle to fall away, but the more they go on, they don't. Arsenal are inconsistent, even though they're second. Chelsea, you feel are beatable and a team that you can overtake. City will feel confident that when they get everyone back and they're firing, they can get top 4 relatively easily. The title is beyond them, and I think Foden said you'd be stupid to say that. I just think something's different this season with the mentality, and I think it will take a lot more to get that back. So when we've been relying on, they can just go on one of these winning runs, things like Brentford happen, and you wonder what's different this season, and maybe the new signings will help, but I just think they've given themselves even more to do than they have in the past. So I think comfortably top 4, maybe even second, but if Liverpool Liverpool don't win the title, the story will be Liverpool have thrown this away more than any other club has thrown away a title, as much as whoever comes and wins it. So yeah, it's a difficult. I understand why every time there's a change in points and that sort of thing that you think, oh, maybe it can still happen, but I think when you got players like Phil Foden saying, "Nah, come on, it's done." I think you've got to listen to that, and I think Guardiola's not given up on it, but knows that it's silly to talk about a title when you're so far behind.
So obviously, every game in the Premier League is an important game, but how important is this Ipswich game now for City coming up?
I mean, yeah, if they don't beat Ipswich, and I know Ipswich took the lead against City in the home game, but they've lost at home against Brighton. If you don't beat them, then things are probably worse than you think. It's going to be a long journey. It's a new ground and maybe a bit more of an old school ground and compact, and the atmosphere will be good. And I'm thinking when City have played like Leeds away and Nottingham Forest and these sort of like traditional British sort of really good grounds, but uncomfortable grounds. Maybe even like Luton is a smaller example, but you've got maybe the smaller changing rooms and not as many of the luxuries. It is a chance where you can sort of be off your game, but City, they've just got to win. It's as simple as that. Ipswich is struggling, and if they have any ambition of continuing to turn things around, they've got to win. And if they win, it's I think 3 wins in 5 and 2 draws. That's a bit better, and you can look up and go to PSG. And it isn't, like I say, it's not just the Ipswich game. It's the momentum and the confidence going into PSG, which will be I don't know what to predict from that one because PSG are not the side that they were, but they're still full of very, very good attacking players. So they need to be confident. If they were to drop points or even sort of concede a couple and come away not with any doubts, I think it would be quite. I'm struggling to think of the word, but it would be a less than ideal preparation for PSG and the Champions League. And it's also the fact if you start thinking about PSG, you're not going to beat Ipswich, so they've got to be fully focused on that. But knowing that there's more than 3 points at stake.
And finally, sorry, I've got such a dry throat today. Jeez, it's this cold weather. It was beautiful yesterday. It's absolutely grey and freezing today. It's so all over the. Welcome to Manchester, sunny Manchester. Of every climate within 10 minutes, apparently. But yeah, finally, what do you think City fans should take away from this week? It's been quite a turbulent week in terms of news. Obviously, it just never ends. But do you think with the new signings coming in, with Haaland coming in, is it like, right, okay, guys, stay with us, be confident. We've got the ability to deliver. We've got these players coming in, or is there still like a slight cause for concern, do you think?
It's mad that, well, I can't even remember when it was, but a week ago, the club captain has to leave, and he's been there for however long. He's an incredible player in City's recent history, and he was the man who lifted the Club World Cup. And asking to leave mid-season should be one of the, not just the biggest City story of the season, but one of the biggest Premier League stories of the season. That should be sort of Premier League years news and that sort of thing. But it's been, we're barely talking about it because it's forgotten. It's just, oh yeah, Kyle Walker's going to leave. Because since then we've had another game that's been full of drama. We've, 3 signings on the way, and this Haaland contract's come out of nowhere. And I would suggest that any worries of an aging squad and are they going to get a rebuild right, or even are they committed to a rebuild, I think this week has answered that. They are looking at players who are young. I was sent a tweet earlier, and you've got not just the young players who are signing, which is Kusanov and Rice, and they're sort of 20 and 18, and even Marmoush is 25, only just about to turn 26, and that's perfect age for a striker. And he's been described to me as a late bloomer, so he could potentially go on for longer than you would expect someone in his position to go on for. But you got Foden and Haaland, they're 24, Gvardiol and Doku and McAtee are 22, Oscar Bob's 21, Sabino and Rico Lewis are 20. All of those, bar Foden, are on relatively long-term contracts, and it would be a surprise to see Foden not sign a new contract to join them. You've got, I was at the youth game yesterday, and these are players who are almost certainly never going to play for City, but they're still pretty good, and they're still going to have very good careers and probably raise City a lot of money. And I would say that the present might be a bit tricky, but City seem confident in the future. And one thing we've not mentioned about the Haaland contract, and it's not a direct link, but it underlines City's confidence with those charges, because does Haaland sign a 10-year contract if he thinks he's going to be playing in League Two for 2 or 3 of those years? It feels unlikely. City, but it reinforces that City have always had the same stance, which is they insist they're innocent and they're entirely confident. But the transfer spend that City are looking at, and I think Cambiasso is the next name from Juventus, and there's an interest. He looks like maybe a Cancelo type replacement who can play on both sides and on the wing and right back and left back and invert inside. It feels like City are committed to making this rebuild work for Guardiola, and whatever happens with Guardiola, that they've got a team that a new manager can take over and continue to win things with. So, yeah, they might not be great at the moment on the pitch, and you can even say that they can go to it. You can't even say with confidence that they'll go to Ipswich and win, because I don't think you can say confidently they'll win any game at the moment. But the noises that they're making off the pitch are positive, and I think fans can cling on to that.
Well, Joe, thank you as always for your insight. It's been good to chat with you on what is quite a mad morning. I got sent a message by at 8:30 this morning by Dennis Stewart's son, who used to play for City. Yeah, it's certainly mad. But that's it for Talking City this week. You've had me for both days, like you. I'm going to go and buy a football and hope I'm like Marmoush and a late blue man beyond 500,000 next week. So you probably won't see me next week. I'm going to be City's next star signing player. As always, listeners, what's your take? Was the Brentford game just a bump in the road or a sign of bigger issues? And how do you feel about Haaland committing his future to City? Share your thoughts and comments on social media, on YouTube, and don't forget to subscribe to Talking City for the latest updates. Until next time, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. I've been Luke Walters, and again, big thank you to Joe.